varios estudiantes de Yale se sintieron un poco descontentos con lo que estaba pasando dentro de este templo. Cuando pasaban por allí a medianoche, a veces escuchaban ruidos extraños y todo tipo de rumores en el campus de Yale sobre lo que podría ser. Hubo un robo, lo llamó la puerta de Yale, porque hubo un robo en el templo y los estudiantes que entraron catalogan lo que encontraron.
Aquí es donde se pone raro, porque ya sabes cómo suelen ser estas historias, ¿verdad? Siempre es algo que la gente dice, o que algunos creen, pero él está afirmando algo más específico. Dice que hubo un momento hace mucho tiempo en el que el secreto se resquebrajó. Los estudiantes se irrumpieron, y según él se llevaron la documentación y lo que encontraron dentro tenía números en las paredes.
E hicieron un dibujo, un diseño del interior del templo, y 3 de las habitaciones están numeradas. Una es 322, otra es 323 y otra es 300. Sospecho que 322 también es el número del capítulo.
Y luego deja caer el número 322. Y aquí es donde la historia cambia de nuevo, porque los números no funcionan como los símbolos. Un símbolo se puede interpretar de 100 maneras, pero un número normalmente apunta a algo específico. Y lo que dice a continuación es la parte que realmente me impactó, porque implica que 322 no está escrito simplemente en una pared, se utiliza como firma, ya que sin decirlo revela que soy uno de vosotros.
325 es una identificación. Además, en la correspondencia entre miembros concluyen su correspondencia diciendo que tú y yo concluimos tu servidor, o tú, sinceramente, concluyen el tuyo en 322.
Y aquí es donde el nombre que la mayoría de la gente reconoce finalmente entra en la historia. Porque el orden no es como lo conoce Internet. Se conoce por algo mucho más simple. Algo que suena casi infantil. Hasta que te das cuenta de cuánto tiempo ha estado vinculado al poder real. Calavera y huesos. Y el número que lo sigue hasta 322. Ahora bien, esta es la parte que la gente suele saltarse, porque resulta incómoda. Pero también es la parte que lo explica todo. Mira esto.
Este es un símbolo de muerte. Ahora bien, ¿por qué tomaría un símbolo de muerte?
Por lo que tengo entendido, cuando se inicia un nuevo miembro, que sería en el último año en Yale, se le coloca dentro de un ataúd. Dios mío. Y por las fotografías que tenemos de los miembros dentro del templo, muchas de estas fotografías son de los de 15 años sentados alrededor de una mesa y tienen esta calavera y las tibias cruzadas sobre la mesa frente a ellos. Es el símbolo de la muerte y se le ha llamado la hermandad de la muerte, y creo que probablemente debería llamarse más adecuadamente la hermandad de la muerte.
Vale, aquí es donde mi cerebro dejó de tratar esto como un rumor, porque hasta ahora todo podía explicarse. Pero este es el primer detalle que parece deliberado, como si estuviera diseñado para hacerte algo. Y cuando ves rituales como este aparecer dentro de una red cerrada, empiezas a hacerte una pregunta diferente. No es si es real, sino ¿para qué sirve?
Mira la historia en las biografías de los miembros principales de la orden y reconstruye su carrera y comprueba si hay un patrón común en sus carreras. Pero volviendo a lo que decía, tengo que reconstruir los objetivos. ¿Cuáles son los objetivos? En palabras de un miembro, la fuerza es el derecho. Si tienes el poder, lo usas para lograr tus objetivos. ¿Cuál es el objetivo? De mirar las historias de los miembros individuales solo puede hacer una cosa: adquirir poder, mantener el poder, usar el poder para sus propios fines.
Ahí está. Ese es el motor que subyace a todas las imágenes. Poder. Adquiérelo. Consérvalo. Úsalo. Y aquí es donde la historia empieza a tomar forma. Porque ahora el ritual tiene sentido. El templo tiene sentido. El código tiene sentido. No está ahí para parecer espeluznante. Está ahí para crear una máquina, un conducto, una estructura de lealtad, una red que hace que la gente ascienda y la mantiene alineada.
Esta IA china rompió el internet. Es mejor que cualquier inconsistencia de personajes, con una calidad nativa de 4K. Ediciones tan realistas y tan útiles que parecen hechas por expertos, y sí, te permite usarla gratis. Tú también puedes crear.
Por ejemplo, Abel Harriman es un miembro muy influyente de la orden. Harriman fue iniciado en 1913. Su número de club es de 111. Todos sus otros 14 miembros del D11 han muerto. Abel Harriman es el único que queda. Pasando a la otra parte de tu pregunta, ¿quiénes son algunos de los miembros importantes en la actualidad? Dos hombres destacan. Uno es Aime Garcia, que es, supongo, el ángel financiero jefe del Partido Demócrata. El otro es el vicepresidente, George Herbert Walker Bush. La familia Bush es bastante importante dentro de la orden. Ahora bien, si retrocedemos un poco en la historia, descubriremos que el padre de George Bush, Prescott Sheldon Bush, también era miembro de la orden. Era miembro de Brown Brothers Harriman, que es la empresa de banca privada Harriman. Así que hoy tenemos a dos hombres que supuestamente están en la oposición política. Bush y Harriman son en realidad miembros de la misma sociedad secreta. Y el padre de Bush no solo era miembro, sino socio de lo que entonces era Harriman and Company, que más tarde se convirtió en Burns Harriman. Así que tras bambalinas, y esto es algo que no se ve hasta que se investiga, hay personas que aparecen en la oposición política, financiera o industrial, o en muchos sentidos, que están trabajando juntas. Y ahora here,
Ese es el momento en el que la historia cambia, porque ahora no es solo simbolismo, es una afirmación sobre la alineación de personas que parecen estar en lados opuestos, moviéndose por el mismo conducto. Y si eso suena imposible, explica el método en una frase.
El método que utilizan es el de la dialéctica hegeliana. La tesis contra la antítesis lleva a una síntesis. En otras palabras, para Hegel, para que la historia progrese, tiene que haber conflicto. Y cuando observas a las personas clave del orden, verás que generan conflicto. Bush y Harriman están en conflicto político. Coffin y Buckley, aunque forman parte del mismo orden, están en conflicto público entre sí, porque el conflicto lleva a una nueva síntesis.
En términos sencillos, es un conflicto intencional, un bando contra el otro. Y mientras todos están atrapados en la lucha, el resultado se determina en otro lugar. Si alguna vez has sentido que el bando ganador cambia, pero la dirección no, esto explica por qué. Ahora, la pregunta es, ¿qué sentido tiene? Porque si el conflicto está diseñado, el resultado no es aleatorio. Y Sutton dice que el objetivo no es solo la influencia, es más importante que el dinero. Dice que es una dirección para todo el sistema. Mira esto.
En este punto, solo se puede deducir de las operaciones de estos hombres como individuos y trabajando juntos. Quieren adquirir poder por encima de todo. Al observar sus acciones, el poder político consiste en provocar lo que ellos llaman un gay, que es un pero utilizan las técnicas hegelianas. Sabemos lo suficiente sobre Hegel para saber que esto no solo significa que me guste procesar la creación del conflicto, sino que también significa que individuos como tú y yo, o cualquiera que este programa, seremos engranajes del Estado en el que no tenemos derechos individuales. Nuestros derechos, según Hegel, los derechos individuales, según Hegel, se traducen en obediencia al Estado.
Sutton va mucho más allá en esta entrevista. Habla de historia, instituciones y eventos mundiales. Y obviamente no podemos incluir todo eso en un solo vídeo. Ahora bien, no estoy aquí para decirte qué creer. Solo te estoy mostrando otra forma de ver el poder. Si esto te ha llamado la atención, mira la entrevista completa porque a veces las señales más importantes no están ocultas. Simplemente nunca se explican. Y tengo mucha curiosidad. ¿Qué parte te ha impactado más? Cuéntame en los comentarios.
This one's for the hungry ones. All you midnight snackers. You know who you are.
The changing world order. The times ahead will be radically different from those that we've experienced in our lifetimes, though similar to many times before. How do I know that? Because they always have been. Over my roughly 50 years of global macroeconomic investing, I've learned the hard way that the most important events that surprised me did so because they never happened in my lifetime. These These painful surprises led me to study the last 500 years of history for similar situations, where I saw that they had indeed happened many times before, with the ups and the downs of the Dutch, British, and U.S. empires. And every time they did, it was a sign of the changing world order. This study taught me valuable lessons that I'm going to pass along to you here in a distilled form. You can find the comprehensive version in my book, Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order. Let me begin with a story that brought me to this point, about how I learned to anticipate the future by studying the past. In 1971, when I was a young clerk on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, the United States ran out of money and defaulted on its debts. That's right, the U.S. ran out of money. How? Well, back then, gold was the money used in transactions between countries. Paper money, like the dollar, was like checks in a checkbook in that it had no value other than it could be exchanged for gold, which was the real money. At the time, the United States was spending a lot more money than it was earning by writing a lot more of these paper money checks than it had gold in the bank to exchange for them. As people turned these checks into the bank for gold money, the amount of gold in the U.S. started to dwindle. It soon became obvious that the U.S. couldn't keep its promises for all the existing paper money, so people holding dollars rushed to exchange them before the gold ran out. Recognizing that the U.S. was going to run out of real money, on Sunday evening, August 15th, President Nixon went on television to tell the world that the U.S. was breaking its promise to let people exchange their dollars for gold. Of course, he didn't say it that way. He said it more diplomatically, without making it clear that the United States was defaulting.
The strength of a nation's currency is based on the strength of that nation's economy. And the American economy is by far the strongest.
La orden es realmente una sociedad secreta sin recursos.
Is by far the strongest in the world. Accordingly, I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury.
If you don't have a competitor to Google, a competitor to Uber, a competitor to Facebook, a competitor to Apple, a competitor to Amazon.com, if every German or Italian or French or British producer has to go through those cloud lists in order to sell their stuff, even in Europe, and Amazon makes 42 billion every year only in Europe and pays zero tax. Zero. Well, you're gone. You're finished.
For more than a century, socialists have believed that capitalism will end and it will be replaced by something.
The Senate is in quorum call. I request that the quorum call be vitiated. Without objection, sir. Billionaires. And as someone who has...
Senator from Vermont.
That war is the ultimate clash of civilizations. In 1914, Britain controlled nearly a quarter of the Earth's land surface. London was the financial capital of the world. The British pound was the global reserve. December 2nd, 1805. Napoleon Bonaparte stands on a frozen hill in Moravia, watching 73,000 men prepare to face impossible odds. By sunset, he'll achieve military perfection. A victory so flawless, so complete, that historians will study it for the next 2 centuries. But here's what they don't tell you in the history books. This triumph will trigger a chain reaction that destroys him. The Battle of Austerlitz didn't just win a war, it cursed an empire. Let's rewind. Fall, 1805. Napoleon's in trouble, real trouble. Austria, Russia, Britain, Sweden, they formed the Third Coalition and they want him dead. 90,000 Austrian and Russian troops are converging on his position near a Moravian village called Austerlitz. Napoleon's army? Exhausted. They've just marched 700 miles in 40 days. Men are collapsing from fatigue. Supplies are low. The smart move? Retreat. Pull back to France. Regroup. But Napoleon doesn't make smart moves. He makes legendary ones. He looks at the terrain around Austerlitz and sees something his enemies don't. A hill called the Pratzen Heights dominates the battlefield. Control that hill, control everything. So he does something insane. He pretends to be weak. Napoleon deliberately abandons the Pratzen Heights. He pulls his forces back. He sends negotiators to the coalition begging for peace. He makes himself look desperate. And the coalition commanders, they eat it up. See, there's this Russian general named Kutuzov, old, experienced, cautious. He looks at Napoleon's position and thinks, this is a trap. But he's overruled, because sitting next to Kutuzov is 28-year-old Tsar Alexander I of Russia. Young, ambitious, hungry for glory. And he's absolutely convinced that Napoleon is finished. The meeting before the battle, Alexander literally draws the battle plan himself. He's not a military commander, he's a kid playing with toy soldiers. But here's the crucial detail that changes everything. Alexander orders 40,000 men to march off the Pratzen Heights and attack Napoleon's weak right flank. Napoleon's been waiting for this moment for 3 weeks. December 2nd, 4 a.m. A thick fog blankets the battlefield. You can't see 20 feet in front of you. Napoleon's men are in position, hidden in the mist. They've been waiting in the freezing cold all night. Napoleon rides between the battalions. Soldiers light torches to see him. It's the anniversary of his coronation. Exactly 1 year since he crowned himself emperor. Some men shout, "Long live the emperor." Napoleon turns to his marshals and says something chilling. Before sunset, that army will be mine. 7 a.m. The fog starts to lift, and that's when the Russian columns begin marching down from the Pratzen Heights, exactly as Napoleon predicted. 40,000 men streaming south, leaving the high ground completely exposed. Napoleon watches through his telescope, waits. His hand grips the lens so hard his knuckles turn white. One of his marshals asks, "Sire, when do we attack?" Napoleon doesn't move. Not yet. The tension is unbearable, but here's what you need to understand about this moment. Why is Napoleon so calm? He's not just winning a battle. He's creating a masterpiece. Everything, the timing, the terrain, the psychology, has to be perfect. Because Napoleon knows something we often forget. In war, timing isn't important. It's everything. 9 a.m. The Russian columns are fully committed now. They're attacking Napoleon's right flank with everything they have. And the Pratzen Heights, nearly empty. Napoleon turns to Marshal Soult. "How long will it take you to reach the top of the Pratzen?" 20 minutes, sire." Napoleon looks at his watch. "Then go." 18,000 French troops emerge from the fog like ghosts. They surge up the Pratzen Heights in massive columns. The few Russian defenders still on the hill don't stand a chance. In less than an hour, Napoleon controls the high ground. And now he has the entire Russian and Austrian army in a vice. The coalition forces look up and realize, with absolute horror, that they've been outmaneuvered. The Russian Imperial Guard tries to retake the heights. These are elite troops, the best in the Russian army. They charge uphill into withering French artillery fire. They're slaughtered. Alexander watches his guard, his personal troops, get cut to pieces. And for the first time in his life, the young Tsar understands what war actually is. Let's pause here, because this is where the battle becomes something darker. The southern Russian columns realize they're trapped. Behind them are the frozen Sachin ponds. Napoleon orders his artillery to shell the ice. Thousands of men, soldiers, horses, cannons, plunge into freezing water. Later, Napoleon will claim 20,000 Russians drowned. That number's exaggerated, probably closer to 200. But the image becomes legendary. The Battle of 3 Emperors. Napoleon's perfect victory. By sunset, the coalition army has lost 27,000 men. Napoleon? About 9,000. It's not just a victory, it's annihilation. So Napoleon wins. He's achieved military perfection. The coalition crumbles. Austria surrenders. Russia retreats. Napoleon stands at the peak of his power. And this is where everything starts to go wrong. Because Austerlitz teaches Napoleon the worst possible lesson. That he's invincible. Think about it. He just beat 2 empires simultaneously. He turned their own strategy against them. He controlled every variable. Why would he ever doubt himself again? See, Austerlitz works because Napoleon's fighting European armies that play by European rules, predictable formations, conventional strategies, commanders who can be deceived. But his success terrifies Europe. Britain tightens its naval blockade. Napoleon responds with the continental system, trying to strangle British trade. But that requires controlling the entire European coastline, which means more invasions, more occupations, more wars. In Spain, he fights guerrillas who won't line up for pitched battles. They ambush, disappear, ambush again, Everything that worked at Austerlitz, useless. In Russia, he faces an enemy that won't fight. They just retreat, burning everything behind them. He wins the battles, but loses the war. And here's the tragedy. Napoleon keeps trying to recreate Austerlitz. He keeps looking for that one decisive battle that will end everything. But Austerlitz was unique. The terrain, the weather, the enemy mistakes. You can't force lightning to strike twice. You know what Austerlitz reminds me of? A gambler hitting the jackpot on their first night at the casino. They walk away thinking, I figured it out, I found the system. So they keep playing, and they keep raising the stakes, because the first one was so easy, so perfect. Napoleon raises the stakes after Austerlitz. Prussia, crushed at Jena. Austria again, defeated at Wagram. Each victory makes him bolder. Each victory makes him take bigger risks, until Russia. Here's the cruel irony. At Austerlitz, Napoleon succeeds because he understands his limitations. He's outnumbered, so he uses deception. He's tired, so he chooses his ground carefully. He's vulnerable, so he forces his enemy to make mistakes. But after Austerlitz, he stops believing he has limitations. In 1812, he invades Russia with 600,000 men, the largest army Europe has ever seen. He doesn't prepare for winter, doesn't secure his supply lines, doesn't consider that maybe, just maybe, the Russians won't fight the way he wants them to. He marches to Moscow, captures it, and finds it empty and burning. He waits for the Tsar to surrender. The Tsar doesn't surrender. Napoleon retreats. Winter comes. Of those 600,000 men, fewer than 100,000 make it back. And even then, even after the disaster in Russia, he still believes in the Austerlitz model. One more decisive battle, one more perfect victory. Waterloo proves him wrong. So what killed Napoleon? It wasn't the British, it wasn't the Russians, it wasn't the Prussians. It was Austerlitz. His greatest triumph became his template for everything that followed. And that template only works under very specific conditions that he could never recreate. There's a military principle called victory disease. It's what happens when success makes you stop learning, when winning makes you believe you're immune to the rules everyone else has to follow. Napoleon caught victory disease on December 2nd, 1805. See, the dangerous thing about being brilliant is that one perfect day can convince you that you're always going to be brilliant, that the conditions that made you successful once will magically reappear whenever you need them. But battlefields change. Enemies adapt. Weather shifts. Luck runs out. Napoleon dies in exile on St. Helena in 1821. Sometimes, in his final years, he would talk about Austerlitz, describe the fog, the timing, the look on Alexander's face when the trap closed, the battle that proved he was a genius, the battle that convinced him he couldn't lose, the battle that sealed his fate. History remembers Austerlitz as Napoleon's masterpiece, and it was. But maybe the real lesson isn't about military strategy or battlefield tactics. Maybe it's simpler than that. Your greatest victory can become your greatest weakness if you let it convince you that you're invincible. Because on a frozen battlefield in Moravia, Napoleon learned he could win any battle. He just forgot to ask, at what cost? If this video made you think, do me a favor, hit the like button. And subscribe to Histanum, because I dive deep into topics like this every day.
¿Puedo comprar esta máquina de soldar por 2,000 pesos mexicanos?
¡Esto es imposible! Solo cuesta 9 pesos con 90 centavos. Sígueme, esta es la promoción.
In the 1930s, a far-right group in Finland captured this man, their former president, and took him and his wife from Helsinki to Joensuu, a remote Finnish city almost 300 miles from their home. The group interrogated them, threatened them, and then released them. This was the Lapua movement, a violent conservative political movement that almost pushed Finland into authoritarianism. But then something happened. Somehow they managed to stave off fascism, and they've remained a stable democracy ever since.
Today, Helsinki is a great...
These are the 7 most powerful men in China. They represent the top leadership positions of the ruling party.
October 2000.
Ahora hablas de terror. ¿Y yo qué?
He estado aterrorizado toda mi vida. Toda mi vida.
I'm here for now the 21st, get them to do what the Trump political operation wants. I'm here for now the...
Joining our discussion now is Democratic Senator Sheldon.
Elon Musk turning on Donald Trump today comes after Donald Trump turned on the man who chooses Donald Trump's Supreme Court justices. Last week, Donald Trump posted, "I was new to Washington, and it was suggested that I use the Federalist Society as a recommending source on judges. I did so, openly and freely, but then realized that they were under the thumb of a real sleazebag named Leonard Leo, a bad person who, in his own way, probably hates America and obviously has his own separate ambitions. He openly brags how he controls judges and even justices on the United States Supreme Court." Well, as I understand it, having spent most of the day in the car, Donald Trump spent the day talking about eating tariffs. Well, Donald Trump's favorite. But today, the United States Supreme Court granted Donald Trump immunity for conduct described in executive.
We are, as I said, expecting the President.
The videos were really inspiring. Like, you're the reason I'm like going into grad school. And there's this little bell in the back of my mind that's like, do I want that? To get more people going into math PhDs, Math Academia Finance, and...
Es 9 de agosto de 1965. Este es Lee Kuan Yew. Acaba de enterarse de que...
Japan, the prime minister called a snap.
How does Rice University ensure that foundational
Live from London, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Lizzie Burden with your top stories. Victory rally, Japanese stocks surge and the yen edges higher after Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi wins a super... This is Horizons. Let me start with you.
Good morning, I'm Rashad Salamat.
And I'm Doug Krisner. Here are the stories we're following today. De rescatar al dictador fascista Benito Mussolini y convertirse en el soldado de élite favorito de Adolf Hitler, a supuestamente asesorar a Juan Domingo Perón en Argentina y al presidente egipcio Gamal Abdel Nasser para aparentemente terminar trabajando como espía y asesino del propio Mossad israelí. La historia de Otto Skorzeny es una de las más extrañas e increíbles de todo el siglo XX. Una vida con más giros, contradicciones y sorpresas que muchas películas de Hollywood. Conocido por los aliados como Scarface o el hombre más peligroso de Europa, Otto Skorzeny fue uno de los oficiales más audaces de las Waffen-SS y un pionero de las fuerzas especiales modernas, liderando algunas de las operaciones más arriesgadas y difíciles de creer de la Segunda Guerra Mundial. Esto ya sería suficiente para asegurar su nombre en los libros de historia militar, no siempre por razones buenas, pero después de la guerra, Otto Skorzeny no solo sobrevivió y esquivó sorprendentemente los tribunales aliados, sino que se convirtió en algo así como una leyenda. Skorzeny nunca dejó de operar desde las sombras, y como si todo esto fuera poco, el mismo hombre que había sido condecorado por Hitler terminó convirtiéndose en una especie de agente del Mossad israelí. No es broma. En este video te contaré en detalle la increíble historia de Otto Skorzeny. Te habla Jorge Rojas. Bienvenido a Armapedia. Johann Anton Skorzeny nació en Viena en 1908 en el seno de una familia de clase media con una fuerte tradición militar ligada al antiguo imperio austrohúngaro. Su niñez estuvo marcada por la derrota en la Primera Guerra Mundial, la disolución del imperio, la firma del Tratado de Versalles y un profundo sentimiento de humillación y orgullo nacional austriaco y alemán. Otto Skorzeny estudió ingeniería en la Universidad Técnica de Viena, donde se integró a una Burschenschaft.
On February 15, 1988, a man carried 5 copies of his new book into a bookstore in New Haven. On the cover, a Feynman diagram, the schematic physicists used to map how subatomic particles exchange force. The book argued that sorcery runs on the same mechanics. He placed the copies on the shelf. That same day, Richard Feynman died. The author didn't know until he read the obituary 2 days later. An omen had marked the publication of a book about the mechanics of omens.
Stephen Mace's Sorcery as Virtual Mechanics proposed what most physicists would dismiss and most magicians never thought to attempt: a working mechanical explanation for how magic functions, not metaphor. Mechanism. You're about to learn how virtual photons, particles that shouldn't exist, mediate every force interaction in the universe. How Carl Jung documented the same dynamic between human minds, and how the artist-sorcerer Austin Osman Spare built a protocol to exploit it. This is the physics of the impossible, and it's testable.
Dale impulso a tus objetivos con los productos modulares de SoftSwiss hechos para cualquier negocio iGaming. Seguridad sólida.
The physics of the impossible, and it's testable. Austin Osman Spare was born in London in 1886 and died in 1956. He was an artist by profession and predilection, and a sorcerer by practice and conviction. He used magic freely, both to produce physical effects and as fuel for his art. He spent several years in the orbit of Aleister Crowley, contributed drawings to Crowley's Equinox, and then left. Crowley's demands for obedience and his insistence on Golden Dawn symbolism repelled Spare at a fundamental level. Because Spare's entire methodology rested on one principle that Crowley's hierarchical system could not accommodate. Every magician must build their own symbolic language. No inherited system, no borrowed gods, no second-hand maps of the psyche. You approach the wilderness from your own unique position, and your map must have the fluidity to adapt to your own orientation. Spare's reputation as a pioneer of sorceress methodology rests on exactly this insistence, that each practitioner develop a personal symbolic architecture from scratch. This wasn't new. It had ancient precedent. According to the Egyptologist Ogden Goelet, the ancient Egyptians would invent myths to explain the origins of rituals and instruments, not the other way around. The priesthood would discover a new psychic dynamic through magical and astral research, then compose a mythical narrative as a cover story for the innovation. The myth was the user manual. The ritual was the technology. Spare took this principle and stripped away even the myth. No cover stories, no narrative scaffolding, just the raw mechanism, compressed into a symbol only you can read. Spare's magic centers on the relativity of belief. He felt that the shapes our worlds take depend entirely on what we believe about them. As he wrote in the Book of Pleasure, we are what we believe and what it implies by a process of time in the conception. Creation is caused by this bondage to formula. Most of what you believe, you didn't choose. Your parents installed it. Your culture reinforced it. Every interaction you've ever had has layered more programming on top. But Spare proposed that these consensual worldviews need not trap you. By manipulating your beliefs with enough depth and power, you can manipulate your reality. The catch, and this is where most people fail, is that Spare was not referring to conscious, discursive opinions. He meant the presumptions built as reflexes and habits into the unconscious mind. The deep code, the operating system you can't see running. To change that programming, you have to go organic, directing the change down into the deep psyche, rather than letting it flash out in fantasy and its inevitable bad reaction. Here's the protocol. Step 1, write out your desire in a concise sentence. Step 2, cross out all the duplicate letters. Step 3, take what remains and combine those letters into a monogram, a single abstract glyph. This is your sigil. It should appear wholly non-representational, giving no hint of its meaning. This is critical. The sigil must be unreadable, even to you, because its job is to carry your intention past the conscious mind without triggering the dual principle. If you can look at it and think, ah yes, that's my wish for money, the conscious mind will immediately generate the counter thought, and the energy splits. The sigil has to be opaque, a sealed envelope addressed to the unconscious. Step 4, memorize the sigil, then put it out of your mind. Like, most people don't know that this exists, that there was this revolution in math in the 19th century that kind of changed the way that we think about math. But the beginnings of it...
Are you saying the Smithsonian hides evidence of giants?
The story's always the same. This guy's digging and finds these giant bones, calls the Smithsonian, they come over, they investigate, they take the bones, they go back, and then it disappears. Much later, the Dead Sea Scrolls are found, and then among the thousands of parchment, there's the Book of Enoch. That title sounds cute until you read it and you realize he's talking about really Adam and Eve. The CIA was so interested in the Book of Adam and Eve is because it describes the end of the world.
Let's dive into the giants.
Giants are fun. And where do you want to start? The beginning?
Yeah.
Giants are in every culture's history. Every culture's got giants mentioned. Ancient Indian Vedas, Native Americans, Island of Malta, East Asian. Every culture has giants. And the Bible, of course. Epic of Gilgamesh. So giants show up all through our culture. And whenever I see that, a lot of what I do is just pattern recognition. Like, I wasn't even really a flood myth guy until I started doing my show. And it's like, this flood story keeps showing up over and over, no matter what I'm talking about.
AJ Gentile, welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
It's good to have you.
This is exciting for me. I'm a fan.
Well, this is exciting for me because I'm a fan. In fact, I was telling you at breakfast, you are the only YouTube channel that I watch on a consistent basis because I don't want to hear all the noise and stuff. I kind of live in it. And, man, you just have a great...
Hola. En realidad, no tenía intención de hacer otro video sobre Epstein y menos aún tan rápido. Por contra, como pienso que la mayoría compartimos, los ficheros estaban fatal. Han dejado a todos con la boca abierta. Pero vaya, he encontrado algo que es mucho más alarmante. De modo que, bueno, sin más, supongo que venimos a examinar estos, ¿verdad? Creo que son 61 de los 380 correos electrónicos que encontré. ¿Qué estaba buscando? Bien, me dijeron que buscara la palabra Jerry Key. Echemos un vistazo a estos mensajes de Jeffrey Epstein de Blink. 4 de mayo de 2013. Casi a la 1 de la mañana. Asunto cecina. Francis tiene tiempo de venir mañana para enseñarme a prepararla. Punto. ¿Alguien quiere una clase de cecina? También nos traerá una muestra de su nueva receta de cecina del restaurante. Y os manda un cordial saludo. Trabaja en un restaurante llamado Cannibal y cocina. Espera cecina de res y filetes. Mañana tiene tiempo para expresión, si te parece bien. No es un buen momento para empezar. Por ejemplo, la siguiente es de Karina Shuliak para Francis, presumiblemente. Francis Derby, que es un nombre con el que nos familiarizaremos bastante. Asunto, cecina de res. Hola, Blanca. J pide que le traigas más cecina de res el viernes. ¿También vuelas el viernes? En caso contrario, me gustaría recogerla personalmente y llevarla conmigo en el avión. Por favor, avísame. Gracias, Karina. Y luego del mencionado Francis vuelo. El viernes llevaré cecina. Vale, es un poco raro, pero... Continuemos. De Francis Derby a Blank. Asunto. Cecina. Solo quería hablar sobre la cecina. Dijo que iba a empezar a comer comida normal de nuevo, así que podría comer menos cecina. Dicho esto, tiene 6 bolsas en el congelador de abajo para su próximo viaje. Creo que debería ser suficiente para que lo atienda. Cualquier otra pregunta, háganmelo saber. Gracias, Francis.
Ivor Oliveira went to Jeffrey Epstein's island. That's me running towards the satanic temple of the evil billionaire Jeffrey Epstein on his private island swarming with security.
Oh my God, look at the testing.
Shoot me if you dare! What are you hiding, Epstein?
Natives from the U.S. Virgin Islands. Epstein, where are you?
So the first part of the scheme was to get our hands on 2 jet skis while being goofy tourist vloggers asking if there were any nearby islands we should take a look at while we toured the ocean. Should we go through Little James and Big James, or those no-nos?
No, no go through there.
They'll shoot us. Don't go through there.
Somebody's island.
Oh, it's somebody's island.
Yeah.
By the government?
No, private.
What would happen? Not that we would.
En invierno,
de alma guerrera. Esos guerreros y guerreras que siguen sus corazonadas. Cerveza indio de alma guerrera. Evita el exceso.
So I come from the great land of the chieftain, Elizabeth Warren, and I would like to know, Maura Healey is our governor, and she has asked citizens of Massachusetts to take illegal immigrants into their homes and house them because they don't have enough housing for all of them. So I just want to know, answer my question first. Are you willing to do what Maura Healey asked the citizens of Massachusetts to do and house illegal immigrants in your own home? Because she asked us to do that.
Recently, over 3 million more pages of the Epstein files were released to the public. While much of the shocking content was expected, what caught many off guard was that some of the files mentioned Bitcoin. And this has sparked countless headlines across crypto news outlets and sent social media into a frenzy. There's been a wave of viral posts on X and Reddit making all kinds of claims, some more credible than others. Some say that Epstein spoke with Bitcoin's creators, others point to him telling people not to buy BTC, and a few even speculate that Epstein was Satoshi Nakamoto all along. That's why today we're diving deep into the files to see exactly what they say about Bitcoin and what it could all mean for crypto's future. My name is Guy, and you're watching the Coin Bureau. Now, given the sensitive
Ese es mi perrito. ¿Verdad que es adorable? This is the best part of summer. I know, right? These tomatoes are perfect. And the company isn't bad either. This is the best part of summer. I know, right? These tomatoes are perfect. And the company isn't bad either. This is the best part of summer. I know, right? These tomatoes are perfect. And the company isn't bad either. This is the best part of summer. I know, right? These tomatoes are perfect. And the company isn't bad either. This is the best part of summer. I know, right? These tomatoes are perfect. And the company isn't bad either. This is the best part of summer. I know, right? These tomatoes are perfect. And the company isn't bad either. This is the best part of summer. I know, right? These tomatoes are perfect. And the company isn't bad either. This is the best part of summer. I know, right?